Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm Chris Love.
And I'm Jane Mackey. BC is still in the lead for the US Sailing College membership drive. Now, we've been telling you about how easy it is to get your team in the running to get fully outfitted by Sperry topsider shoes by having the most college US sailing memberships. But Chris and I were talking, why do you actually need a college membership with US sailing? So there are a couple of reasons. If you're going to do any of the following, you're going to need one, such as to get certified as a sailing instructor, to coach, to judge, to umpire, or be a race manager, or if you want to enter into any US sailing championships like the Hinman and Prince of Wales. There are also a whole lot of other benefits which, even if you do have a membership, you might not know about. You can also find the full list of benefits at membership.ussailing.org.
And with a college membership, your one-time fee gets you all of this for the next 4 years, even if you graduate. Sign up now at ussailing.org/college.
So now we're going to take a look at the Interconference regattas from the past weekend. First up, we have the Rainier Cup sailed at the Gorge, where University of Washington won the regatta by 7 points over Western Washington. Thanks to Kyle Eaton for his video from the beautiful Columbia River Gorge.
Last start this regatta, we spent a lot of time struggling in the back of the fleet, so we're just really proud of ourselves for the improvement.
And conditions yesterday pretty tricky.
Yeah, I mean it was our second set, there was a lot of wind, and we're kind of a smaller pair, so. But it was really good. We've been working really, really hard to be able to sail on that much breeze.
Nice. And winning B here, really close with the UW women going into next weekend.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's still going to be hard. Yeah, it's still going to be a really good regatta.
At the Emily Wick Trophy at Coast Guard, we got a nice preview for this weekend for NISSA Women's Champs. BC looking very strong going into that regatta, winning this one even without Annie Hager. Thanks to John Duffett and Ted Green for this video from New London.
Next, we look at the championships from this past weekend. It was a huge weekend for co-ed sailing with 30 of the 36 spots for semi-finals now decided, as well as some team racing.
So Jane, looking at our prediction scores, we both got it right at the Rainier Cup. We both got it wrong at Emily Wick.
At the Mesa Co-ed Champs in Hobart, you'll recall there are 8 berths to be filled for semi-finals. Georgetown won the regatta, which is not entirely surprising, and Cornell clinched the last spot. Leading up to this regatta, we actually talked at length with Brian Clancy, head coach of Cornell, to see what he thought would happen this weekend. Chris, you should have been listening when he said that Cornell would make it into the top 8 and get that semi-final berth. I pick up a point here on the prediction scoreboard.
Michigan hosted the MCSA Championship for 5 berths to semifinals. Wisconsin takes the win. Minnesota, Northwestern, Michigan, and UIC, the University of Illinois Chicago, all qualify. And Jane, we nailed it. Notre Dame just 10 points out of qualifying. And thanks to Liz Smith from University of Michigan for the video.
Harvard wins the NISSA Co-ed Champs hosted at Harvard, along with all the other usual suspects qualifying for semi-finals here.
Oh sure, we did pretty well on our picks, but what an embarrassing weekend for me not picking my alma mater, Boston University. They get 6th overall. My buddies MJ and Fiona winning B Division senior year on the river. What a great weekend for the Terriers. They're going to national semifinals. Rob Buds. Of course, that means one of our picks could not make the list, and oh, what a tragedy. It's the MIT Beavers. They tie Brown for 8th place, that last qualifying spot, but they lose the tiebreaker, and so they'll be sitting this one out.
2012 New England Dinghy champion, Harvard Crimson. Congratulations.
Yeah, so it was pretty up and down, obviously, it still is. It was super puffy, so we were just trying to stay consistent. We didn't even win any races until today. Yesterday we had some 2s and 3s thrown in there, and we're just trying to stay in the top 10 for the most part. Getting to pressure and staying lifted was important, especially in the mornings both days. There were much bigger pressure differentials, so it was important to be in that first puff that drove you over the rest of the fleet, and then you kind of ended up in a race with the top 5 instead of the whole fleet. But as the day wore on, we were just trying to like stay in pressure, stay lifted, and stay connected with boats that we were beating.
All right, well, congratulations. Nice job, you guys.
Thanks, you.
Thanks to the Harvard sailing team for the video and to Ken Legler for those awesome photos. Great work. Moving on to SISA here in Austin, Texas. The University of Texas hosted the Co-Ed Championship. Nasty weather this weekend, as you can see. At the end of the weekend, the results are Texas A&M Galveston for the win, Texas A&M second, University of Texas third, and Tulane fourth. But man, SISA is killing us on these predictions. Tulane, it's later discovered, gets hit with a 20-point penalty for not filling out the paperwork correctly, moving Oklahoma State up into fourth. Colorado, who Jane picked, is a no-show. And thanks to Colin Feek for the photos from the regatta.
At the PCC-SC team race held at Stanford this past weekend, Stanford takes the one berth for nationals, which is not too surprising, and they did it rather convincingly with 15-0 as their record. Thanks to John Vandermoor and the Stanford Cardinal for the footage from the weekend. Next up is the SACER team race champs sailed at Charleston with 2 berths to nationals. As expected, Charleston gets the first spot here, sailing at home, with Miami getting the second spot. Now, we really weren't sure about the second spot between Miami and USF, and it seemed like a good match because Miami got 2 out of 3 against USF and 1 out of 3 against Charleston. Now that gives Chris 1 more on the prediction scoreboard. Bugger.
How's the sailing out there today?
Awesome. Very.
Definitely very.
Yeah, it was a good breeze in Charleston, and it's nice sailing over there without a lot less current.
Yeah, less current over on Crab Bank.
Yeah.
Hey, Mac, hold on a second. All right, well, congratulations. You guys learned some stuff out there, and gonna continue getting better, heading down to Austin.
Yeah.
Keep improving.
We'll be ready.
All right, well, come on up and train with us. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks to Brooks Clark for the video and to Ward Cromwell for the interview. Before moving on to this weekend, let's take a quick recap of where we're at currently with teams qualifying for nationals. Now you can see that we've almost filled out the chart with just 2 districts to go for the co-ed.
And here's the scene for the ICSA APS Team Race National Championship. We've got the Mid-Atlantic, the South Atlantic, and the Pacific Coast qualifying. The other districts will be holding their qualifiers in the coming weekends. And for the Sperry Topsider Women's National Championship and semifinals, we have yet to see anyone host their regatta, but this weekend we've got 4 women's championships for a total of 21 out of 27 berths awarded.
Now we catch up with Meredith Powelson from Sailing World to get a first-hand look at the latest Sailing World college rankings from the Open Coaches poll, updated since the last release on April 4th.
Hi, Chris.
How are you?
Great. I have the 5th rankings of the spring season for you.
All right, let's take it.
All right. In the co-ed rankings, we're still seeing Yale at the top of the list. And if you remember back to the last time we talked, it was nearly a unanimous vote to rank them number 1. But this time, the first place votes by the coaches are spread out a little bit more. And actually, 6 different teams received first place votes. One team that really moved up this week was Harvard. They move up to 7th place. In the last rankings, they were in 16th. So a really solid performance by the Crimson. They had 3 coaches vote for them for first place this week.
Big reward there for winning New England last weekend.
Right, but not every co-ed team was so lucky. We saw Brown drop down 8 places to 11th place. But still very much a contender, and it'll be interesting to see what happens for the next ranking.
And a lot of teams down there after number 20. What's that all about?
Right, so in the also receiving votes section, which a team can make that list if they don't make the top 20 cut, but they do have at least 2 coaches who vote for them. And the trend there has been a lot of schools. So the last time we talked, there were 7 schools there. This time there are 6 schools. So always a good spot to check for teams that are right on the cusp.
Okay, looking over to the women's poll now.
So when we last spoke, Georgetown was ranked first. and they are still ranked first with 12 coaches voting for them in that first place spot. But interestingly, now they're tied with Brown, but no coaches voted for Brown in the first place spot. So what that means is that enough coaches must have consistently voted Brown in a high spot, not first, but in a high spot for them to be tied with Georgetown.
So wait, let me get this straight. 12 coaches put Georgetown at number 1. And let's just say everyone else puts, everyone in the whole poll puts Brown in number 2. The remaining coaches must have either tanked Georgetown or completely left them off the list. I know they haven't sailed in like 3 or 4 weeks, but that's a pretty harsh punishment.
Yeah, well, it's a really close poll this time around. I mean, Stanford also received no first place votes, but they're in third, and they're only 9 points away from that first place tie. Another team that's really close is Yale. One coach voted for them in first place. Dartmouth is in 5th, and Boston College has 4 first place votes. They move up from 10th place in the last poll. And those top 6 teams that I just mentioned are only separated by 23 points, which really isn't that much when it comes to this.
Well, thanks again for joining us on the show, and I guess we'll see you in 2 more weeks. We still have a few weeks left before Nationals.
Great, thanks.
Looking ahead to this weekend's Interconference regattas, we have the Thompson at Coast Guard. This will be more fleet racing practice for all those who have qualified. That's all but MIT and Coast Guard Academy.
Over at Kings Point, it's the Admirals Cup. This is a 3-division event which includes a laser. Has little significance this time of year, but the fleet racing should be good practice for these teams who qualified for nationals. Taking a look at the roster, it looks like a lot of schools have teams at both of these regattas. It'll be interesting to see where they focus their efforts.
Moving on to our predictions this weekend, it's a little tricky. Some coaches are sending their top teams to the Admirals, some are sending them to the Thompson, and some are giving their top skippers a weekend off.
I'm taking a little bit of a gamble here because I don't exactly know which players these teams are sending to the regattas, but for the Thompson, I'm going to take Harvard, fresh off their win at New England's. I think they're going to sail well again. Down at the Admirals, I'm going to lean toward Georgetown. Not sure who they're playing in each division, but I know they've got a lot of capable skippers for all 3 of the divisions, and I'm hoping they're going to send them this weekend.
So my predictions this weekend. I'm going to go with Yale at the Thompson. Confident that they're sending a good team here, and they've obviously been doing really well. At the Admirals, I'm going to choose Tufts. They also did pretty well at the Trucks, which is kind of a similar regatta to this. And without really knowing where everyone's sending their teams this weekend, I think they've got a good shot at doing well.
And now it's time for Better Know a District. This week, NISSA. So happy today on Better Know a District to have Ken Legler, who's the official schedule writer for NISSA and also a longtime mainstay for the New England Intercollegiate Sailing Association. Welcome, Ken.
Well, thanks, Chris.
So, you know, we've gone around, we've met some different districts and heard a little bit about who they are, who's involved. But, you know, NISSA, not only do I come from there, but it's kind of a special district in that it's where college sailing was born, wasn't it?
It is. In fact, I like to consider MIT the mecca of college sailing, where it all began, and it's still the center of our conference.
So tell us, I know you're up on all this stuff. Tell us how that evolved, how the idea of doing some sailing competition back in the day evolved to what ICSA has become today.
NISSA started about the same time ICSA did, around 1936, and they had nationals starting soon after that, I think as early as 37. But I have witnessed some very large changes to the sport in my time, which began as an undergrad in the 70s and then as a coach in the late 70s in Mesa at Kings Point, and then at Tufts ever since 1980. And there have been some considerable changes in college sailing relative to the conferences in that time and to the boats and everything else.
You guys are kind of blessed to have such a tight-knit, physically close, and well-off group of schools. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we always have been, and probably always will be, the most geographically dense conference in the country. in that we have 5 major hosts right in the Boston area with BC, BU, MIT, Harvard, and Tufts. But Rhode Island has 5 hosts, and they're all less than 2 hours from Boston. Connecticut has 4 hosts, and that's 2 and a little more from Boston. There's also teams scattered all over northern New England, in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And there are, the extremes from Boston would be Vermont at 3 3/4 hours, Maine Maritime at 4.5 hours, and Yale at 2 1/4, or actually 2.5. But those are the extremes. And for a lot of conferences, they're probably just mad to hear me say that, because that would be their shortest drive in many cases. If you're in the middle of Texas or even upstate New York somewhere, you're going a long way for regattas.
Many or most of the schools in NISSA are varsity, or at least seem that way to the outside. I know BU, for instance, is a club team. We still have 18 boats. We still have a full-time head coach and multiple coaches on the weekends. It's kind of a unique thing. Do you know, and can you explain how that happened that NISSA is so lucky to have such strong programs all throughout the conference?
Well, a lot of sports tend to be geographically centralized. I always considered the lacrosse belt to be from Syracuse down through Maryland and into North Carolina. You won't see that much lacrosse, in the mountain states. And you're certainly not going to see much sailing in the mountain states. Movement to New England, talent-wise, has been a trend. New England's always had a lot of strong programs, but it's gotten stronger to the detriment of the other conferences. If you were to take these eras of coaching and break them up into decades, 1980 saw a major increase in the number of coaches in the East, and they recruited the talent out of the Midwest. In 1990, there was another increase. In 2000, another big increase with the advent of part-time and in some cases full-time assistant coaches, which has added to the recruiting even more. So now New England and to some degree Mid-Atlantic and even the South Atlantic is sucking the talent out of the West Coast. It used to be just the Midwest.
Thanks.
Yeah, the women's is going to be tough too, by the way, coming up. There were a lot of top skippers at the dinghy championship that would normally sail women's. So our women's, we only have 7 qualifiers. And even though our own team has been flirting with a top 10 ranking, it's going to be tough for us to be one of those 7. But it's going to be tough for some other teams, partly because we're going to be there trying to get one of those spots. So I counted 10 teams with a very realistic chance of getting one of those 7 spots. But there's actually about 15 really good teams going to this New England Women's Championship. That event has got more depth than I've seen in a long time.
Okay, well, good luck this weekend. Now we look ahead to the championships this weekend. Last weekend it was all about the co-eds. This weekend all about women's, with 4 championships including the top 2 biggest districts. We start first with Mesa. ODU is the host for 5 berths to semifinals and 2 straight to nationals. Looking at the teams, you've got to expect Georgetown to take the win, with Sidney Bolger sailing A Division. Navy is going to be pretty solid for second here, I think, as long as they get a little bit of breeze. Then you've got Hobart, William Smith, St. Mary's College, ODU, and Cornell looking pretty good. Washington College as well, I think, will probably take that last spot. Of course, we'll have to keep our eye on UPenn, George Washington, and Columbia. You might see one of these teams pick off that last qualifying spot. With only 13 teams and a wide range of talent, every race becomes that much more important. I think this is especially true for the teams that are maybe just outside the top 7, but if they get lucky, they can probably get in there, and it's going to be really hard for those opponents to put more points on them, with the fleet so spread out.
The NISSA Women's Champs are to be held this weekend at BC. There are 5 spots for semi-finals, and 2 teams will go straight through to finals. It will be an interesting regatta because this is the most saturated district in terms of competitive women's sailing. Now, we're pretty confident about the top 4. BC, Brown, Dartmouth and Yale are the only teams that have won an interconference regatta this season. And BC has shown they can do well with or without Annie, and they're sure to have her this weekend. They'll be sailing in their own boats on their home waters.
Absolutely. I'm taking BC as a lock. Sailing at home, they've got their great performance last weekend, plus you add to the mix the 2011 College Sailor of the Year, Annie Hager. Hands down, this is a victory for BC.
I don't know, Chris. I'm definitely not 100% sure on BC. I just feel like we haven't seen them compete in top form a lot this season. But in saying that, they are at home in their boats. They'll be having their whole crew making them sandwiches and lunch on shore, so I guess we'll see. But Brown has been really consistent these past couple of weekends, along with Yale and Dartmouth. Also they're really consistent, up and down, battling with each other. For the next 3 spots, it's got to be a mix of Harvard, URI, Tufts, Bowdoin, and even Roger Williams has a shot. Harvard, we haven't seen a lot of them this season, so not sure on them. It's a bit of a question mark. And Roger Williams, do think that they're a bit of a long shot based on their record this season.
I wouldn't put it past Bowdoin or Roger Williams to sneak in there, but for my predictions, I'm going to take URI, Tufts, and Harvard. 6 teams are expected to make it out to Hawaii for the Pacific Coast Women's Championship. 2 will go to semifinals, 1 will go to finals. And for this one, I'm expecting Stanford to take the win. USC looking at probably a 2nd place finish, with Hawaii taking that last spot, sailing at home.
The SACER Women's Champs at Clemson this weekend has 2 spots going through to semis and 1 to finals. It's a small district for women. We're expecting College of Charleston to take the win straight through to finals, Eckerd and USF to get those last 2 spots.
Yeah, there's only 2 other teams there, and neither of them really have a strong women's program this year. And now back at CISA at the Nationals venue here in Austin, Texas. University of Texas is hosting for 1 trip to semifinals, 1 trip to finals. Now here I'm expecting University of Texas probably to get the finals berth, sailing at home, with Tulane picking up the other spot. They seem to be the strongest women's teams this year, but I'll be interested to see if OSU is going to show up. Last I heard, they were still a maybe, and this is really important for the district. If they don't get 5 teams, according to the rules, they're going to lose that semifinals berth, which of course makes winning the regatta that much more important. So we're going to have to stay tuned and check it out. If that happens, we'll then have to hear from ICSA where that berth is going to go. It could be any of the other 6 districts.
The NISSA Co-ed Champs are at Western Washington this weekend with 2 spots for semi-finals. University of Washington, Western Washington, and Portland State are likely candidates for those 2 spots. Without a lot of information on this district, but based off of last weekend, we could expect Western Washington and University of Washington for those 2 spots.
Yeah, I'll take UW for the win, with the home team taking that 2nd berth. Now we announce this week's U.S. Sailing College Sailors of the Week. In co-ed racing, it's Duncan Howes and Devin Furlong for their heroic 4th quarter efforts at the America Trophy, the Mesa Co-ed Championships. Howes and Furlong, with Furlong off the bench with only 2 races sailed in the regatta, posted a 1-2 set in the last races to overcome an 11-point deficit and qualify for semifinals. They were still behind the Virginia Wahoos going into the last race, but managed to finish ahead with a 3-point margin. Over in the women's side, we've got Sally Mace and Helena Scott from Stanford for a tough win at the WIC this weekend in A Division. It was a good group in A and tough conditions with the southwest breeze blowing at Coast Guard, causing team scores to go all over the place. But these 2 rose to the occasion and got it done.
That's it for us. See you next week.
See ya.